Hello and welcome everyone to Fuel Poverty Action series of monthly learning sessions, Fuel for Thought, from fuel poverty to climate justice. Fuel for Thought is a space to share research and lived experience, tackle lies, and clear up confusion on fuel poverty and climate change. As we ask and answer questions with experts, activists, and campaigners. Today's session is Heat and Light Are Basic Rights, for which we have a panel of speakers from a range of backgrounds and lived experience, who will be answering questions including, should energy suppliers have the right to force prepayment meters on their customers? If water suppliers can't disconnect or impose prepayment meters, why should other utilities be able to do this? Are new protections sufficient, granted around PPMs, or will people die as a result? How did we win the suspension last year in PPM impositions, and how can we bring that ban back for good this time? Speaking first, we have Francis Lobel, who is a member of Fuel Poverty Action and works as a project manager on energy policy at Repowering London. Fran has a particular interest in rights and protections in relation to prepayment meters and parity of rights between energy and the water sector. Fran has also written a blog on this issue on the FPA website, which is entitled Heat and Light Are Basic Rights. Energy customers need the same rights and protections as domestic water customers, and we need it now, which I will link in the chat. Fran, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Amal. So yeah, in May last year, Ruth asked me to write the blog post that Amal has just mentioned. But it had been, the subject matter had been on my mind and collectively within Fuel Poverty Action for some time. It didn't come out of nowhere. And in April last year, it was the beginning of the really ferocious price hikes, the beginning of the unaffordability part of the energy crisis. And by July last year, the big issue published a headline, something like 187,000 people had what energy suppliers had applied for a huge number of warrants to forcibly install prepayment meters. And it was obvious, we could see this coming, basically, the energy suppliers were going to respond to the mounting unaffordability debt crisis in the sector by abusing their powers to forcibly install prepayment meters. Energy suppliers were supposedly sort of restrained by really, really well-established rules on only forcibly installing prepayment meters if safe and practicable, and only as a last resort. But clearly those powers were being abused. And then Dean Kirby from the newspaper started publishing daily stories about these abuses of power. And Repowering London, the organisation that I also worked for, we supplied Dean with a few early case studies. Some of our clients were willing to talk about what an appalling and traumatizing experience it had been for them to have their homes broken into. And we through the relentless publicity that was coming from the paper, it became something that was becoming pretty mainstream. Self-disconnection wasn't some sort of fringe term that was only being used by fuel poverty activists. It was becoming a distressingly common lived experience. It was being spoken about and written about in mainstream sort of media outlets. The End Fuel Poverty Coalition collectively took a very clear and hardline stance. It was decided that the position that should be taken would be that a total prohibition on the forced installation of prepayment meters was the only, appropriate response to the unfolding crisis. The Times, it made headline news in the Times in February this year. An undercover journalist from the Times basically recorded debt collectors working on behalf of British Gas breaking into people's homes, joking, basically revealing their utter disregard for the customers that that they were traumatizing and and endangering, really, because heat and light are basic rights. It's an essential to life utility. Just to say that I'm so really curious, really happy that the next speaker, William Baker, is here, because I think the central argument in the blog post in question, Heat and Light are Basic Rights, it's not uncommon knowledge that that to be disconnected for debt reasons has been prohibited in the water sector since 1999. But a question while I was thinking about this and discussing this with Ruth and other FPA members, why are there no water prepayment meters in the UK? Well, it turned out the answer was that they were banned in 1998. So a year before, there was a total prohibition on on domestic water customers being disconnected for debt reasons. A year before that, a consortium of local authorities made a successful appeal to the High Court to have water prepayment meters banned. So the whole issue of self-disconnection in the water sector doesn't exist. It's something the water sector has, and water customers, even those who are severely indebted and feeling the effects of water poverty, we don't have disconnection in the water sector. And self-disconnection is disconnection by the back door, basically. The new rules, they have been the code of practice that the energy regulator was shamed into introducing following the actions and activities that that I've just outlined. As a result of that, Ofgem has introduced a new code of practice as licence conditions. I think in many ways it has weakened rights and protections for some groups of energy consumers. There is a do not install category where it's entirely prohibited to forcibly install or mode switch prepayment customers. But there's another category of customers referred to as the further assessment needed, where there are very narrow and specific definitions of vulnerability, and these customers, frankly, would have been better protected. In fact, they are still protected by the pre-existing guidance on safety and practicability. So as ever, the stance of Fuel Poverty Action and the End Fuel Poverty Coalition is that forced, what is referred to as involuntary PPM, because it refers to the practice of remote mode switching from credit mode to prepayment mode for smart meters, as well as physically forcibly installing a different meter type, that it has to end, basically, that it's. And it has good precedent. The country decided in 1998 that it's fundamentally uncivilized, that it's an act of brutality. So, it's a clear ask and an ongoing battle, basically. But that's all I need, to say on the subject. I'm very curious to hear about what went down with the High Court and the successful appeal to have water prepayment meters banned.
Thanks a lot, Francis. Really good to hear about the specificities of prepayment meter installations, protections that people do have. But yes, as you said, self-disconnection is disconnection through the back door. And it's something that, and yeah, Fuel Poverty Action has been campaigning against the forcible installation of prepayment meters for quite some years now. Before we hear from William, however, I'm going to go to Kim from Hastings, who's here to share her experience of having a prepayment meter while she was out, which will no doubt colour some of the things that Francis has spoken to. Kim?
Hi, yeah, hello. So I had a prepayment. British Gas broke into my house about 7 years ago. The place that I lived before here, this different place. It was when my daughter was about 3 or 4 years old. They'd charged me twice for a bill, wrongly, and while I was out at work, came back with my daughter in the dark, I have to say, and they'd been into my flat, and I didn't know, but just saw kind of like a mess on the floor in the kitchen, and realised that there was a meter installed, and there was a sort of piece of paper down there saying that that's what had happened. So when we came in, it was literally like we were walking into a place that had just been burgled. So it was quite frightening. I tried to get a hold of British Gas, and they admitted that they'd charged me twice and it was a mistake, but they were totally non-committal about talking to me and just put all these obstacles in the way when I was already kind of struggling, single parent with a small child. I found the whole thing hugely distressing, but didn't really have the energy or the know-how to fight back. And then about a year or two, about a year ago, I think it is now, when it all sort of came out with the Times journalist uncovering this sort of stuff, and that they were actually targeting older people and single parents because they were easier target. I was really like shocked, because the stories that I was hearing on the radio and everything were exactly what happened to me. So I got a hold of the BBC. I ended up on PM and sort of described my situation, and then someone from Centrica came on and said, oh yeah, we're going to really help, and yeah, this is terrible and shouldn't happen, and sounded really promising. So I got a load of emails straight after that, and in the end they sort of put me in touch with the ombudsman, who basically did nothing. And I was like, oh, there was sort of about compensation, about the fact that it was a mistake, it wasn't even supposed to be fitted, that they shouldn't have broken into my house, the amount of trauma that it caused me. And I wasn't searching for compensation, but it was a traumatic experience when you've got a small child and you think you've been burgled. And the ombudsman set up a thing where they gave me 150 quid off my next bill and said, that's about as much as I can do, sorry love. And he started the conversation as, you're not really going to get much out of this. So it was really like, what? But again, you have to have a certain amount of want to fight. When something happened 7 years ago, you know what I mean? My life's changed a lot since then. So it's like it was a long time ago. So again, but the work that I do now, I work for a charity called Heart, which runs in Hastings, and we work really close with Citizens Advice 1066. Yes, 1066 Hastings. Yeah, we do loads of winter readiness training, and how you can talk to your gas companies and how to do it without getting what's the word, sort of led astray or fobbed off or whatever like that. So that's been really, so we have our sort of own activisty way of doing it down here, which has a lot to do with information and get in contact with us first and things like that. So that's my story. I hope it was clear. I sort of garbled it a bit, but there you go.
No, it was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Kim. Thanks for coming on and telling your story. Yeah, it really speaks to, I think, well, obviously everyone has a different experience, but it really speaks to just how cutthroat, grueling and traumatic it is for everyone who's had a prepayment meter forcibly installed in their homes. Yeah, and I'm really shocked to hear as well of this sort of campaign of discouragement and the pitiful amount of compensation that that they offer to you, which I think is also
well, when I was on PM with a really high representative from Centrica, you would have thought I was going to get a yacht and I'd be sailing off to the Bahamas. Do you know what I mean? And actually, the £150 I got put on my meter in the place that I don't even live in anymore. So it's a joke, really. Anyway, I'll stop now. I'll pass it over.
Thanks a lot, Kim. I'm going to bring in William Baker, who is a trustee of the Fuel Poverty Research Network and a freelance researcher on fuel poverty and fair transition issues. William previously works for Energy Systems Catapult, Citizens Advice, Consumer Focus, Centre for Sustainable Energy, and many years ago, the Liverpool City Council, where, if I'm correct, William was instrumental in the campaign against water disconnections and to win a ban on the practice of installing prepayment meters for water. William?
Okay, thank you, Amal. Yeah, so I'll just give you a bit of background to how this came about. What you need to understand is when the poll tax was introduced, that replaced domestic rates. And up till then, water bills were based on domestic rates. And of course, for many people, they still are. And as I should say as an aside, that actually rateable values are a much more progressive way of paying for council services than, say, the council tax is now. There's a much larger range from the higher to the bottom, and of course, low-income households tend to be in properties with lower rateable values, so they also tended to have lower water rates as a result. But the other thing to understand was that a lot of people, particularly say social housing tenants, would pay their water bills as part of their rent. When water rates were based on what rateable values, and of course many got housing benefit which covered both the rent and water charges. So when poll tax came along and then later council tax, for many people this was the first time that they had actually ever had to pay water bills. And not surprisingly, this is a time when poverty was rising rapidly. Water arrears increased as a result. So water companies wanted to install these budget devices to recover water debt, rather than perhaps develop more proactive approaches to supporting people pay their bills. North West Water and other water companies, with approval from Ofwat, then the regulator, started trialling the devices in some people's homes. And they contacted councils, including Liverpool, which is the council I worked for, to inform them about the trials. And what also happened at this time was many council tenants had approached the city council with concerns about both compulsory water metering, which was now being used for newer properties which didn't have rateable values, and then also their concerns about budget payment devices. And quite a lot of people got together to set up the Merseyside water meter campaign. I mean, it's very typical of Liverpool. People do actually get up and make a fuss about things, and it's a very striking feature of sort of the communities in Liverpool and Merseyside generally. And I was the anti-poverty officer for Liverpool and convened a worker group of council officers such as environmental health, housing, social services, building control. And I'll say a bit about their role later. And we also had community and tenants representatives on that working group. So environmental health said about the potential public health impact if you started seeing self-disconnection from the budget devices. Housing were concerned about the impact on tenants' well-being. I contacted the fire service and the health authority for their opinion. The fire service talked about the risk of no water supply if a domestic fire takes place. And not having water, you need to rapidly be able to put out the fire. So that situation could arise if somebody is self-disconnected. And health authorities stress the importance of a constant supply of water for health and the prevention of disease. And what's also, I suppose, another contextual thing was that a lot of councils, including Liverpool, were active in regional anti-poverty forums, which were actually led by councillors. And as Liverpool's anti-poverty officer, I supported my council's involvement in the North West Forum. So I helped draft a motion on behalf of the council to get the forum to campaign against water meters, budget devices, and water poverty in general. We also circulated a model resolution for other councils to adopt. And also at the local level, you were seeing a lot of community campaigning around the issue. And just to give one example, a community worker organised a mass meeting in a community centre for a large council estate on the edge of Liverpool. There was a massive turnout, hundreds of people, with some standing outside the community because it just wasn't room inside. And we had a rep, bravely perhaps, from North West Water said why they wanted to introduce the devices. Environmental health, and myself spoke about the council's concerns. Fire Brigade Union rep spoke about the potential risk of fire, increased fire risk, and a tenants rep spoke about the importance of community solidarity. And that, from that, we organised a petition, media activity to promote the campaign. We got quotes from health and fire reps, as well as the council. And we got lots of coverage at the time in both local and national press and media. So in response to this, North West Water then suggested something called trickle flow, which was instead of actually disconnecting the water supply, they would get a much reduced flow of water to carry on through the people's taps. They sent us a load of graphs and technical data about how trickle flow would work. So I asked our building control if they could sort of interpret this information. And the officer did actually a brilliant job of saying, well, what this actually meant in reality, in practice. So for instance, it would take 15 minutes to boil a kettle of water, or 30 minutes to fill a bath to about 3 to 4 inches. So it's just became obvious that North West Water and the other water companies were determined to roll out budget devices and not to heed our concerns and health concerns and so on. And so it's because of this that Liverpool and 5 other councils decided to take judicial review proceedings against Ofwat on the grounds that it shouldn't have given approval to water companies to install the devices. And you have with judicial review, you have to take it against a public body rather than the water companies themselves. And I have to admit, there was a certain nervousness by my council about going ahead. So you had the head of legal services was warning that the costs could rapidly escalate if Ofwat appealed, and that it could even go as far as the House of Lords. And so, it was a bit nerve-wracking as a fairly junior officer to say, no, you should go for this. But luckily, I had a legal officer in his department who briefed me about the detailed implications of judicial review proceedings and pointed out that the council could pull out at any stage, and that the only initial commitment was the commissioning of a legal opinion and paying for the cost of the QC to represent the councils in the High Court. So I got chief approval for the cost from my chief officer. I do remember him commenting on being in the wrong business when he saw the QC's day rates. And we went ahead. I was a lead officer of the Liverpool Council, which involved gathering the evidence for why water budgets were a bad idea. And I mean, that, just another little story for the time. I had to involve putting together over 100 pages of evidence, getting it checked by key departments and other bodies, approved by councillors. And then I had to swear the evidence in front of an independent lawyer. But when I informed the lawyer, I wasn't a Christian, we had to go through the document, replace every reference to the term affidavit, of which there were many, to affirmation. So what should have been a 5-minute job took about an hour. Anyway, that's just to the side. Our central argument was on the health aspect, and that's that it undermined the requirement of water companies to inform. Also, that it undermined the requirements of water companies to inform social service departments of consumers they intended to disconnect for non-payment, because social services department have this power to intervene and try and stop it. And that they couldn't get around this requirement by installing devices that could potentially give rise to a disconnection due to non-payment. And in fact, I have to say, the social services department very rarely used this power. But the High Court case itself was absolutely, it's a fascinating thing to see. A key issue related to who was actually responsible for the self-disconnection taking place, the consumer or the water company, and more specifically, who was the active agent when the valve in the device cut off the water supply due to non-payment. And RQC argued that water companies were obviously the responsible agent. They installed the valve, and the judge agreed. In effect, the water companies were the key agency. They made it feasible that a disconnection could take place. And I do remember at the time that quite a few of us felt that this must have parallels with fuel prepayment meters, in that the fuel companies are the active agents with respect to so-called self-disconnection from fuel supply, if the consumer doesn't keep the prepayment meter in credit. And that, in effect, fuel prepayments do circumvent statutory disconnection procedures. But whatever, we won the case in the High Court, and I think it's quite an important precedent with respect to councils challenging the actions of privatised utilities. Wish we could see, more of that taking place now. But I think a key reason, there's something I also wanted to stress, a key reason why Ofwat and the water companies as interested parties didn't appeal against the decision or later tried to change the law in their favour was the fact that we had already won the moral, health and safety argument to ban the devices through our preceding campaigning activity. And then just to finish up, as Amal said, we also then campaigned for a complete ban on the disconnection of water for non-payment, again primarily on public health grounds. And health authorities warned that rising disconnections could increase the risk of spread of diseases associated with poor sanitation. Helen Jackson, the MP for Sheffield Hallam, led the campaign in Parliament, which was ultimately successful. That's why we don't have water disconnections as well. And I think we could learn a lot from what happens with water. Does obviously have relevance to fuel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's really, really interesting, William, to hear the story of how you got to where you did. And yeah, I'd be very happy to have a bit more of a discussion later about how this can apply to energy prepayments beyond what you've already spoken to a little bit. Next up, we were supposed to have Ruth, FPA's director, who unfortunately couldn't make it this evening, some unforeseen circumstances. But Ruth had left everything she was going to say in written form, which I was going to read. But I also understand that my microphone has gone very quiet. So I'm wondering if can I get a thumbs up or a thumbs down on that? Is it good? Is it bad? It's all right. All right, then I will just go ahead and read what Ruth had to say. Ruth also had planned to show some pictures throughout the little speech. Thanks, Hannah, for showing those. Oh, let me get out of this as well. All right, so building on what William said, where Ruth wrote, and I want to carry that story on up almost to the present day, in banning prepayment meters, this time for energy. You might remember that last year, contractors were breaking into people's homes on behalf of British Gas. And the Times got an undercover reporter and embedded him with these contractors. And the thug from Arvato Financial Solutions was filmed when they were drilling out the lock, saying, "This is the exciting bit. I love this bit. Remember that?" And British Gas came over all innocent and said they had no idea their contractors were doing anything like this, that they were really, really sorry and they would investigate. Remember that? What you probably don't remember, because they count on us forgetting, is that British Gas have known all about this for years. Fuel Poverty Action were at a big AGM in 2016 where Ruth read out a letter from a disabled woman after British Gas had turned up at her home. They'd installed a prepayment meter outside her house where she couldn't even access it, and they left her in tears. In fact, Fuel Poverty Action had been after British Gas and the rest of them about this from 2015 up to the present day. We'd held actions at Ofgem, at the CMA, we'd raised it in Parliament, we'd submitted evidence to consultations, including reams of testimony from people who'd had PPMs forced on them. Not just FPA, but loads of other organisations, some working with us, like DPAC and AAWG and Unison, some of which you can see in the second picture on the slide, some of who gathered their own evidence, like Citizens Advice. And in fact, there was a big media storm back in 2016, and it looked like everything would change. And then they just waited for the storm to blow over and carried on as before. But one thing we had won on the discriminatory pricing. Ofgem claimed that they had to charge you an extra premium if you had a prepayment meter. They said these meters cost more to manufacture and collecting the money cost more. Never mind the fact that people on PPMs are paying in advance. So actually, the poorest energy customers making an interest-free loan to these rich companies. Ofgem said there was no way around that extra premium. It couldn't be done. Just like they now say there's no alternative to standing charges, which also costs more for the people who have least. They say there's no way around that either. But, and here's the history, with the extra tariffs for PPMs, we actually won them. They were reduced from an extra £300 a year down to £45 a year. And last July, in the middle of all the furore, they were abolished. A smallish win, but a win all the same. However, these violent, traumatic, forced impositions continued. And the courts and Ofgem continued to rubber stamp it all. Until last year, with the rise in prices, it all blew up in their faces. In December 2022, Fuel Poverty Action coordinated 8 warm-up actions all over the UK, pressing for no forced PPMs and for energy for all. That's also, you should be able to see some pictures of that. There's just a little collection there from warm-ups across the UK, including in Glasgow. And there's a little collage at the end as well that kind of collects a lot of the main events together. And in January 2023, we also held vigils and protests outside parliaments, including in Westminster, Scotland, and Wales. Also, there was a big one in London, and the big one in London with NPC, the National Pensioners Convention. That's the picture where you can see a coffin, with a mock coffin with the number of winter deaths that year. of excess winter deaths that year. And then there were also warm-ups and other actions in 6 towns and cities throughout the UK. By that time, so that is January 2023, we were getting daily reports in the newspaper, and finally the Times put that undercover reporter on it and got footage of these traumatic, illegal forced installations that, of course, British Gas knew nothing about. It's at this point that we began to actually see some action in government. Grant Shapps asked suppliers to use warrants as a last resort, which meant absolutely nothing. Within a week of him saying that, there were over 6,000 of them that had been issued. Finally, the country's most senior judges told the courts to halt the authorization of warrants, and then Ofgem confirmed that. The moratorium on the forced installation of prepayment meters was supposed to last while Ofgem drew up new regulations to protect vulnerable people. But we all know that regulations like this don't work. It's been proved for years. And as soon as the new rules came in, they were broken. They started straight off with forced installations in families with babies. That's why these so-called protections don't work. The only way to ban these warrant installations, and for people with smart meters, the only way, is to ban these warrant installations. And for people with smart meters, is to ban remote switching as well. That's everything that Ruth had to say. I hope you, yeah, that was very, very powerful story. Ruth is always very good at not mincing her words. I'm gonna bring in Chia, who is Fuel Poverty Action's lead organizer, who's going to talk a little bit about the current situation, Fuel Poverty Action's recent actions, and some of FPA's planned mobilizations. And just look out for and while Chia makes a start, I'm going to post a little bit more about the living history of prepayment meters. So look out for that in the chat. Chia, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mel. So yeah, on the 4th of November, the Glasgow local hub hosted a vigil in George Square, and it was to remember all those who lost their lives due to cold homes across the UK, or 4,706 of them. So yeah, we held this vigil where we put hundreds of shoes out in the square in the centre of Glasgow, and surrounded them with candles, and got people to gather and just, you know, see how many people who had passed completely unnecessarily, and in a way that because this issue could be avoidable if we had energy for all. And yeah, we had lots of people gathering. We had speakers from councillors, MPs, MSPs, people in fuel poverty, and local activists too. And then what we did was we marched to Ofgem's offices, where we did a banner drop, and we had some more speeches there, and left our own messages at their doorstep. And this was the day, you know, a couple of days before Martin McAllister's first day as the new chair of Ofgem. So we wanted to make sure our messaging was loud and clear, that we wanted them to not give energy companies the green light to allow the forced installation of prepayment meters. Obviously, a whole ban on prepayment meters has to come from government, but Ofgem still has the power to delay it over winter. And yeah, and this, we did this action because we the moratorium that we won last year was going to come to an end on the 8th of November, which is why Fuel Poverty Action also delivered this massive prepayment meter to the Department of Energy and Net Zero, just to show as well, you know, if they force prepayment meters on people, people will fight back. Yeah, so far there has been no forced installation of prepayment meters, even though the warrants were at the ready. Scottish Power had 124 warrants at the ready. So although they could still install them at any minute, really, it's very much this pressure that we put on them which has prevented them from doing it thus far. So we just need to keep this pressure up to keep delaying it, so that people don't have these prepayment meters force them at the absolute worst point in the year to have them forced. Yeah, so as part of building that pressure, as Amal kind of just highlighted, we have these warm-up actions, and our day of action where we'll be holding the warm-ups this year coming up really soon. So we have them on the 1st of December and the 2nd of December. And yeah, I'm going to put a link in the chat of like where you can see some of the warm-ups that are happening across the UK. Only some of them have signed up to the map. There's going to be more warm-ups than what's on the map currently. So if you want to find out more information, if there's no warm-up near you, please email Fuel Poverty Action. But it's just been a pleasure to be part of this kind of work at resisting these prepayment meters and knowing that we're actually making a difference. And yeah, if you want to do more, please join in with the work with Fuel Poverty Action.
Thanks a lot, Gia. I always love seeing that picture of the shoes. It's really a wonderful image that you captured there. Very powerful stuff. This is the part of the session where I'm going to open up for discussion, comments, questions, contributions, any contributions you want to make, really. Oh, I've already got Carrie, he's got a hand up. Wonderful. I'm gonna change the settings here so that everyone can unmute themselves. Yeah, so if you would like to come in to contribute, like Carrie, please raise your virtual hand. To do this, you have to click on the 3 dots at the bottom right of your Zoom window. Scroll, look for where it says reactions, and it should come up with the option to raise a hand. So that's 3 dots at the bottom right of your Zoom window, reactions and raise hand. If you prefer to type, I'll also be monitoring the chat and happy to read out what you said, or if you have any questions. I wasn't quite, so I think I have I've got already 3 people. Carrie, 2 now. I've got Carrie and Kim who want to come in. Carrie, after you.
Yes, hello. Really impressive, and thank you to all the speakers. Yeah, it brings it all home quite horrendously, doesn't it? And we've just sorted out, I'm part of, in Sheffield, and I'm a member of People's Assembly. I'm also a member of Unite Community, and I also clock into Fuel Poverty Action meetings over the last few months. And just pulling it all together has been really good. And the last warm-up training that I went on was really helpful, because that's we've set up, I've asked the Unite Community regional organizer to set up a Zoom meeting and put it out to people across People's Assembly, Sheffield Save Our NHS, you know, there's the Don't Pay guys, and it's given me, just every time I come on to the Fuel Poverty Action sessions, I find them really helpful, because I think, oh yes, we could do that. Yes, we could spread the word a bit wider. Yes, we could involve so-and-so. So I do find these really, really helpful. But the thing that William was talking about a judicial review for Ofwat, I mean, are we contemplating a judicial review of Ofgem? I mean, they are so shocking. I mean, as if they're the regulators. I mean, they are the enablers, are they not, of big vested private interests. So I just read something somebody posted in the chat, and I've fought against having a smart meter every time I pay my bill and in between times. And I'm with a good, it's called Good Energy, so it's a sustainable energy company supposedly, but they push this idea of smart meters, and I've absolutely avoided having one. And I thought no, because I've seen what happened when when my sons left home and I was on my own. I went on to have a water meter. And then my son came back with a serious medical condition, and we were using tons of water for laundry and stuff. And I said, right, okay, I don't want to be at a water meter anymore. And they said, no, that's it. You got it. They don't reverse it. So I've been really kind of suspicious of meters ever since. And I think this kind of focus, I mean, I think we haven't got any obvious energy companies or targets actually within Sheffield itself. But we have got the Magistrates Court, and we've got somebody who's very active in Unite Community, and she's done stuff. She was suggesting that we go down to Magistrates Court if people are feeling kind of the more confrontational end of people that we involve. But we've got 2 days to do it. So I think, we could do, people that would like to do maybe slightly more conventional, slightly less confrontation. I think we're going to be able to combine actions on catering for both types of groups. But it's really interesting to know, with the various people who've talked, Chia and William and Ruth's letter, the different kind of people that you can involve. So no, thank you very much. It's all been exceedingly helpful. And yes, all fired up for the 1st and 2nd of December and on from there. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Carrie. I mean, you spoke to putting Ofgem under judicial review. I wonder if anyone wanted to come in about that. William, perhaps.
So just specifically with as I said, when we took out judicial review against Ofwat, we did first commission a QC's opinion, and about what legal case we had for complaining against water companies and Ofwat's approval of water companies' behaviour, and also usually what I think, as I remember, part of getting a legal opinion is they give you a sort of indication of the likelihood of success as well. So you have to be clear about what point of law that you're claiming that Ofwat and the water companies had broken. And so similarly, you would have to, if you were to consider judicial review proceedings against Ofgem, you need to be point to where you feel they actually breached, their statutory requirements and what fuel companies are meant to do. So and one of the problems with forced installation, I mean, as part of End Fuel Poverty Coalition, we've been campaigning against forced installation because, unfortunately, fuel companies they're one of the few organisations that actually have the right to break into somebody's home. Virtually, I think the only other type are police. Nobody else can break into your home and take up this sort of action and so on. So that's one of the problems. So essentially, we want to see a change of law which prevents fuel companies from carrying out forced installations. So I think, where I think there might be a legal case is the fact that what was happening on an absolute industrial scale was the sheer number of warrants that were being issued, and what is supposed to happen is that before you carry out a forced installation, you're supposed to investigate that consumer's circumstances. And there's a whole bunch of people who should not have a prepayment meter installed at all. And that is actually set out in regulations. So, you can, if you can show that fuel companies are breaching this requirement, and that's what was so obviously happening, and it was pretty disgraceful that magistrates' courts were sort of granting these warrants, thousands of warrants. So it was because the magistrate court is also meant to investigate the circumstances of a person who's going to have a prepayment meter installed. Potentially it could be worth investigating to see whether there has been a breach of requirements on both fuel companies, and and you could say Ofgem had failed to Ofgem does have its primary duties. You might be surprised to hear is to represent consumers as well as take into account fuel companies' financial circumstances. So those are the sorts of things. But if you wanted to go down the road of judicial review proceedings, you would basically need to get a legal expert to say, and this is where somebody like the Good Law Project could potentially play a role and so on. About do we think there might be a strong legal case here?
Thanks a lot, William. I think FPA does have a little working group thinking about legal cases. So that's really interesting. And yeah, definitely. I mean, breach of license agreements is very much on the horizon for legal challenges. I'm going to bring in Kim, who's had their hand up for a little bit. Oh, was that an old hand, Kim?
No, I just took it down to sort of respond.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask, because I was just looking at it, and it's really interesting to see all these things that are going on. I just really love the stuff that Ruth London said, or you spoke for her, and then the stuff that Gia was saying. I just had a quick look at the FPA thing about finding somewhere near you. I can't see anything near Hastings. I'm just wondering whether there's some kind of linking up stuff we can do, because we do very similar sort of, we do some actions, but also this sort of warm up stuff is very much the winter readiness stuff that I was talking about, which is all about sort of educating people about not only what they can do to get bills down and things like that, and stuff that they might be entitled to, like grants, etc., but also that sort of wider sort of more activism stuff. So I think my ask is to keep the lines of communication going, that maybe there's some stuff that we could do in Hastings that links up with Fuel Poverty Action, because we'd be really interested, especially in the work that I do as my day job. So just put that out there.
Could I just respond to Kim? Cool. Another option, if there's nothing going on near you, if you wanted to, I know it's kind of short notice-ish, but if you wanted to organise your own warm-up, it would just be a matter of getting people together in a group somewhere in a public space, or and get all of you to wrap up warm and look like you're wrapping warm, and taking a picture together, and then using that time together to talk about why we need energy for all, and why we need to ban prepayment meters, all the things that you believe in and all the things that we believe in. It's just a way to get people together, talking about it, doing some outreach and getting a picture to show that people want energy for all. They don't want people to go cold this winter.
Okay, yeah, that is helpful. I mean, what I'd really like to do is link it up with the work that we do as Citizens Advice, in a way, because they've been so brilliant about and being quite sharp elbowed. Do you know what I mean? With the law side too. So Yeah, and I think, I mean, in Hastings we all like a bit of getting out there and saying our stuff, so so yeah, so I'll have a look at the things, and maybe it is worth organising something down here ourselves.
Great, that's great. Amazing, Kim. Yeah, I hope Hannah also had a comment on that, saying there might be community members in the Hastings area who we could link him up with, and that's potentially another route to go down, Kim. I'm going to bring in Natalie, who's got a hand up. Glad to see you've got your hand up, Natalie.
Yeah, hello.
Very active on the chat. Welcome.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry. I will, just a disclaimer, I'm autistic and ADHD, so my brain's firing at like 1,000,000 miles per hour. So that's why I've been so engaged. Apologies. Yeah, I'm a cross-sector student, worker, volunteer, activist, advocate, mental health worker. I wear a lot of hats, and I was noticing there's not much positivity here. And I was just thinking along the lines of Kim and other people that have mentioned, obviously, I think that FPA might better serve the consumers by doing educational short videos, for instance, that don't cost anything, that you can easily just post online across your social media, that give sustainability tips. Because unfortunately, because of how complex UK law is, I'm a law student too. I'm also a medical student and a trainee diplomat with the UN, and I'm a global citizen as well, a member of the town hall. But basically, there's no way that this campaign, under its current terms, can be successful, because there are almost all of the homes that are rental homes in the UK, and I mean all of them, have prepayment meters already pre-enforced before most of the residents moved in. And there is no precedent for them to cease using those prepayment meters. I'm a sustainability expert as well. So the only other way to address that is to better educate the public on how, like, look, you need to learn how to financially budget, because the majority of the UK public, fact, do not know how to budget. And second fact, the majority of people don't even know what sustainability means. Unless you work in that or you study in that, most people don't understand it, and they just think it's got something to do with climate, and that's it. But you can do simple things like, don't put your thermostat above 17, because your house, it will take slightly longer to warm up, but it will stay consistently at 17 degrees and you use 8 times less energy. Yeah, energy companies don't tell you that, because they make money out of you by you using your thermostat above like 20 or over. Yeah, so just a quick tip there. Another tip, get radiator reflector panels. And tuck your curtains, get curtains to go over the blinds that you have up at your windows, so that in the winter you can tuck your curtains into the back of your radiator to keep the heat in. Yeah. And you can get magnetic stripped stick-on door covers, so that you can have your door open, but you've got a cover over it, basically like how people used to just put beads over. But this is actually a privacy cover, and it also insulates, and they cost under £30 per door. Yeah, and obviously switch off your plugs you don't need to use. Only use the exact amount of water that you need for the cups of hot drink that you're doing. When you boil the kettle, don't fill it up. It's little things like that, but I'm not being funny. My bill was under £800 over the last year. I've got a 3-bed house. We're all disabled, complex needs, and I work around the clock because I'm a national and international worker. And I don't always get paid because I mainly work for charities. So I'm mainly an unpaid worker. And yeah, I think it's about educating. It is about educating people. Some resourcefulness is it's something you learn. It's not something that comes naturally. So I think maybe the fuel poverty charities maybe need to put that in the campaign too. As a audit, I audit services as well. I've even helped the National Audit Office to audit them. So like I'm a problem solver, and that's why I'm a global citizen and a member of the Global Town Hall. But yeah, basically there are loads of solutions out there. It's just the people knowing about them.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. That's
But those radiator panels only cost a couple of quid each.
Thanks a lot for that.
For a pack. So I hope that helps some people. And weighted blankets, but try to avoid the ones with the little plastic beads in, because those beads escape, and they're harmful to if you've got any animals in the house or children, and they're harmful to the environment. So yeah, try to avoid the ones with the plastic beads in.
Good to know, Natalie. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll leave you to. Sorry, I know I went on a bit there. It wasn't intentional. It's just because I wrote a list of different things that I noticed like people were mentioning. So.
That's all good.
I'm with British Gas, and I've been with them since I was 16, and I've been a private a rental person since that time too, and I'm 39 now. So if I can save that money, and I mainly rely on the government because, like I said, I'm mainly an unpaid charity worker, and I'm severely disabled with complex needs. So like with all of that, and I live in Peterborough, so I don't get nowhere near as much money as everyone down your end. And I live pretty comfortably, to be honest. I think it's about choices. I don't drink, so I don't go out partying, so I don't pay out money for that. I choose not to drive a car. I can drive. I had a license, but that's another saving right there. But yeah, it's little changes that make the biggest impact. So
yeah, thank you, Natalie. So education and choices. Thanks a lot for coming in, and yeah, no need to apologise. I really appreciate all the contributions.
Sorry,
in the thing. Chat and
sorry, human rights. The campaign needs to get on the human rights because that's the only way the campaign's going to succeed. Apologies. I've looked at it from every angle, and I was a part of your previous action in October and stuff as well. And yeah, that's the only way currently because of the current laws and because of how Rishi Sunak's tearing them apart. That's making it more complicated. Because it's bringing in our more ancient laws that were kind of written out by the EU. So yeah.
Okay.
I guess
a lot to unpack there. Sorry, did someone want to come in there? I mean, I think we have a hand raised from Fran. Oh, Chia, sorry, you had a direct.
Yeah, just a direct point. Just that. So there's quite a few organisations that are kind of service providers that do kind of fill that space, and some of those people we do work with and refer people on to, and that's kind of like a part of my role as well. But like mostly FPA's a campaigning organisation, which is why we're doing like the actions, the lobbying, the activism, that kind of thing. But you can always have a joint up approach. But I guess what we're trying to argue for is that if we had energy for all, people wouldn't need to do those things. But thank you for putting the effort into mentioning them.
Thanks a lot, Gia. I just want to make a quick note about time before I hand over to someone else. As I said, the session's only was only running until 7:45. Can always run a little bit over if people want to keep the conversation going. But yeah, just to make note that that's in 5 minutes. I'm going to hand over to Fran, who had maybe a direct point to make as well. And then Jan Short, you're welcome to join in. Fran, you're muted.
That's fine. So I just unmuted myself. Yeah. Hi, question for William and anyone else who wants to come in regard to just returning to points you were making about the specific legal challenges that you made about budget payment units. It's interesting that in their response to the recent consultation about about the new code of practice becoming license conditions in the energy sector with regard to involuntary PPM. I think Age UK or possibly Scope, one or other organisation pointed out that self disconnection or customers who use prepayment meters do not have the same statutory protections as other customers with using other payment types who are protected by the winter moratorium. And it would be the same argument basically that you raised, assumed that actually it is the energy supplier who is the causal agent when the customer self disconnects by either providing or forcibly installing the mechanism that makes that happen. So a couple of big charities / consumer groups responding to Ofgem have raised the point, and I believe I mean obviously you know a ton more about this than I do, but I believe that as well as the health risks and the risks of customers on water prepayment meters not being able to put out house fires, the fact that water customers using prepayment meters were also, you raised this basically, they had less statutory protection than other customer groups. So there is that possibility, to come in from a legal challenge from that point of view, that energy customers are not protected by the winter moratorium just because of a payment type, which is sometimes enforced upon them. And then Alan Murdy, the long-time editor of the Fuel Rights Handbook, has mentioned that the legislation that allows energy suppliers to forcibly enter properties, the gas and electricity rights of entry, that act was only ever devised for the purpose of performing a disconnection, because the technology, so basically he has argued in a policy consultation response to Ofgem, in 2020, that the legislation which allows energy suppliers to forcibly enter homes is highly questionable. I just wanted to get your thoughts on what kind of thinking, what would have to happen for a consortium of people who think alike and feel alike to come together and mount the kind of successful challenge that you made to the water sector, to the energy sector.
Do you want me to come back, Kamal?
Yeah, William, please do, William. If
Yeah.
you could just be mindful of time as well. So.
Yeah, sure. In fact, I do have to go. I've got to go to another meeting at 8 o'clock, so I need quarter of an hour. But very quickly, I mean, I think it would be worth perhaps trying to go through the detailed legal case and for that we took with water budget devices, and specifically around that point that it was fuel companies that actually, it's the water companies that had in effect made the disconnection possible by installing the valve. And it's, and like I said, that it seems to me that's exactly what fuel companies are doing. And you're quite right to say, and that's why I prefer to use the term so-called self-disconnection, because it's they're just getting around the fact, the fact is lots of people just don't have enough money but fuel, water are essential services, and to sort of try and get round the sort of procedures that are there to try and make sure that people don't go without fuel and water. You are in effect by circumventing them by allowing a prepayment meter to disconnect that consumer. I think it becomes a bit contentious if you say ban prepayment altogether for fuel, because there are a lot of people who say they really find it helps with budgeting, and that they don't like the worry of having having that worry of a fuel bill. But I think it's perfectly feasible to have the device. I mean, we always said with water budget devices, we're quite happy with them, but they don't allow that disconnection to take place.
Exactly.
And I think particularly now, and I have to say, I think it, smart makes it more feasible, smart prepayment, that you can still have devices which just don't basically allow the disconnection to take place. And I don't agree with trickle flow. I don't agree with the equivalent for fuel either. So I just think there's, we could look into it, go through all the legal arguments that were made around water budget, see what to extent which they could just be cross transferred over to fuel, and then see and then I think the next thing would be, say, can we now sort of get try and put together a strong legal case, and we require some sort of people legal nous to sort of say, yeah, this might be a goer. And it similarly, like you say, I think is a good point about saying, the rights of entry were only meant to be to actually carry out the disconnection, not putting the prepayments and so on. So it could be seen as an abuse of that actual legislative power. But personally, I don't think they should have a legislative ability. They shouldn't be allowed to do that full stop, whether it's for the disconnection.
Well, there's an argument that in cases where the safety, for example, where there's a gas leak, or cases of energy theft, I wouldn't disagree with that. But specifically to forcibly enter for debt, that's highly questionable. And it was only ever to perform a disconnection for indebted customers, not forcibly install a different payment terms, which is the point that Alan Murdy has made. I think it would be brilliant if Fuel Poverty Action and you and whoever, to possibly work with a solicitor's firm like Bindman's or another firm known for raising this type of judicial review. I think that would be a way forward.
Thanks a lot for that, William and Fran. It would be, I think there's definitely lots of avenues to explore in the future for fuel poverty action on this or explore from this angle, definitely. I'm going to pass on to you, Jan.
Thank you. We've engaged a lot with the regulator on behalf of older people, and I have to say that it's like all regulating bodies, isn't it? No teeth, a lot of talk and no teeth. We were told categorically that no one energy provider has met the new conditions of their license. And I've got that in writing, So then I ask the reason why Scottish Power were then able, before the 8th of November, to go to a court and get warrants passed. We then engaged with the HM Courts and Tribunal manager, I don't know what he calls himself, and he categorically told me that magistrates are given advice, but he didn't say where from. So it seems to have like this secret little panel behind the magistrates saying this is how you deal with these cases. So we're pushing now for an answer on that, but it does seem that the courts are able to do what they think is right without taking into account people's human right to, light, heat, water and food. And they haven't yet got rid of the Human Rights Act. We know they're trying, but at this moment in time, the court must actually understand that taking away those functions from people, no matter their age, no matter their circumstances, without first looking at some kind of strategic help to get people out of debt. There's got to be some strategy. This is not something, okay, we know that there are people that never pay their bills, right? They glue their letterbox up, they never get any bills, they never pay them. And that's okay, and we can deal with that. But when you've got such a hike in energy that we've had, in 2022, that's not the consumer's fault. And the fact that, you know, month on month, in fact, week by week, you know, energy suppliers, providers and suppliers are making huge obscene profits. And that's enabled, you know, by court action to get people force fitted with prepayment meters. So I think there's 3 issues for the NPC really. Is one, we need to tackle the court situation and try and get this little secret panel of people who tell them what to do. 2, we need to really robustly challenge the regulator and make them do the job that they're supposed to do. And 3, I think we've just done a press release today on the standing charges inquiry. So we've sent out to all our affiliated groups and said everybody needs to put into this standing charge and look at alternative ways of making it affordable without making it more difficult for people that have high use because of their medical and health needs, and not make it any harder for people that are, you know, like older people who've absolutely cut down on their energy, only eat sandwiches, you know, have a cooked meal once a week or twice a week. Yeah, they've cut back on their energy, and yet their bills are still high because of the standing charges. I mean, my last bill, I worked out with the standing charge and the 5% VAT, that came to 2/3 of my actual bill. And that is not acceptable. You know, it's not acceptable that people are paying that amount of money when their energy, right? You pay for your energy, and yes, okay, pay for a little bit more, but not that much. So we're really ramping up, and we thank Phil Poverty Action for all the stuff that we get through and that we can actually, you know, become part of. And a lot of our regions are taking part in the warm-ups that you've put together, either through yourselves or through Unite Community or through their own, you know, accesses in local places. So I think a legal challenge will be necessary, but I think it's a lot of work to do before we get there. But we'll be there, you know, with you. We've got a legal challenge against the Federated Data Platform that's been going on for virtually nearly 3 years now. It hasn't cost us a penny at the moment. So there are ways and means of looking at how you make a legal challenge. But for this one, I think you would need absolutely crucial, never to be argued evidence before you go for it. But if you want for it, you know, we would support you to do that. So thank you for tonight. It's been very interesting.
Thank you very much for that. As Hannah said, the FBA Standing Charges campaign is coming soon, and again, just from the chat and from the conversation here, there is just so much interest in working on the legal matters around energy disconnections, which is fantastic to hear. Definitely a note to myself and other FPA organisers who are here in the room and who will be listening to this recording in the future. Yeah, just to take note of all the conversation that's been going on around that. Natalie, I want to bring you in, but I'm going to give you just
sorry, I'll be extra quick.
Just 1
I'm
minute,
mindful.
and then I'll close the session. So
no, that's cool. I just wanted to say, a lot of the British public aren't aware of the priority service legislation that protects all incapacitated and medically disabled or sensorily impaired households in the UK. So if you've got to call your utility company and you have to sign up to the register, if you don't do that, the onus is on us, because the government don't have to give that information out as it currently stands. And if you have medical if you have medical precedent and you require a lot of energy and your income doesn't cover it, and you can evidence to the local authority that you've budgeted as much as you can and you've cut back on like loads of other areas, you're not driving as much, all of that stuff, and like you're exercising more so you can natural body heat, all that stuff, you know, all that stuff, if you can do it, they will give you direct payments. They have to, by law, under the human rights laws currently that Rishi Sunak is currently failing to tear apart, because we're working hard not to let him do that. So you do have precedent, and this is why the campaigns haven't progressed over the last 20 years. This same campaign has been running for nearly 30 years. Did you know that? This same campaign about prepayment meters, 30 years nearly. The same campaign, exact same campaign. It's just been run by like over 30 different charity organisations in the UK so far. So yeah, information that consumers need to know. But yeah, that you do, people that are vulnerable genuinely, provided they can evidence that to the local authority, you don't need to go without heat and you don't need to die this winter. I've got renal failure. I was born with it. I have to have heating, and I'm also neurodivergent, as I already told you, so I'm sensitive to cold and to heat, so it's a temperamental balance. But yeah, you just need to know about it, and the local authority do not give you this information. They should give you it, but they don't. So it's about knowing the right people. But yeah, hopefully you can take that away with you and help yourselves. So yeah, and thank you for the opportunity to share and to participate.
Thank you, Natalie, for all your contributions. Thank you, everyone, for being here, for joining, listening, participating in the session. It's really been a lively discussion, and thank you again to our speakers for your part in making this such an informative time. Because there's so much interest on this topic, I just want to say that for those of you that have signed up, there is like a discussion board that's part of the event. It would be fantastic if, I mean, that's just one place where the conversation can keep going. And also, yeah, if anyone has any ideas of how we can keep this energy going outside of this space, that would also be a good place to discuss that. So that's the link in the chat that I'm putting in now. Yeah, so that's all we have time for today. But Fuel for Thought will be back in just under a month's time on the 14th of December, before everyone goes away for Christmas. The next Fuel for Thought session is entitled Plenty of Money. It's a learning session aimed in response to the recurrent government narrative that, well, not only government, but the recurrent narrative that people in the UK need to make hard choices because of a shortage of funds. We'll have a very exciting lineup of speakers already confirmed. We've got Prem Sikka, who will speak to, or Lord Prem Sikka, who will speak to how and what taxpayers' money is actually spent on, and what he thinks this money should be spent on instead, especially in order to effectively tackle the multiple crises we're facing today. We also have planned to have a speaker on the money accumulated in the gas and oil industries and how public money goes to that. And another speaker also on military spending, including war in Europe and the Middle East. So that would be Ukraine and Israel, Palestine. I'm going to drop the link in the chat for that session. It's live. You can already register to that. And yeah, finally, as Chia's already said, I just want to make another note of this. Yeah, FPA is keeping up the pressure on the government to demand the end to fuel poverty. We're hosting warm-ups across the country, and we want this to be our biggest winter mobilization yet. We're working with Unite Community, People's Assembly Against Austerity, Friends of the Earth, and more. We've already got 3 warm-up events planned in Islington, Manchester, and Bromley. So yeah, if that's something, I assume that's something you're interested in, you can sign up to that at the link that I've just posted in the chat. And To conclude, also, if you want to become a member of FPA, you can email chia@fuelpovertyaction.org.uk. I'm going to switch to gallery view so we can see everyone. Feel free to give a wave, unmute yourselves, say goodbye, and I wish you all a lovely evening and dinner if you haven't had it yet. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Have a good week all.
Bye.